Welcome back to TelehealthFX Talk. I'm really excited about today's episode because we're tackling a question that literally millions of people are typing into Google right now. Is compounded semaglutide safe? And honestly, the answer is way more nuanced than most people realize.
It really is, and the timing on this couldn't be better because the FDA just dropped a major proposal at the end of April 2026 that's going to reshape the compounded GLP-1 landscape. Consumers deserve to understand what's actually happening versus what the scary headlines are saying.
Absolutely. And before we dive in, if you're someone who's been thinking about starting a GLP-1 weight loss program, I want to point you to a resource right away. Head over to go.telehealthfx.com/start and take the free qualification quiz. It takes just a few minutes, and you'll find out if you're eligible for Semaglutide or Tirzepatide delivered right to your door with no hidden membership fees. That's go.telehealthfx.com/start. Okay, let's get into it.
So let's start with the basics for anyone who's newer to this. Compounded semaglutide is the same active ingredient that's in Ozempic and Wegovy, but instead of coming from Novo Nordisk's factory, it's made by a compounding pharmacy. These pharmacies stepped in during the drug shortage that started back in 2022, when demand for GLP-1 weight loss medications exploded and the brand name supply couldn't keep up.
Right, and at the peak of that shortage, somewhere between 1.5 to nearly 4 million Americans were using compounded versions of these medications. For most of them, compounded semaglutide was the only way they could access GLP-1 weight loss treatment at a price they could actually afford.
Which brings us to the safety question. Here's what I want people to understand. The safety of compounded semaglutide is not a simple yes or no. It depends almost entirely on where the medication comes from. A product from a licensed U.S. compounding pharmacy with third-party purity testing and a certificate of analysis, that's a fundamentally different thing from something you order off a random website with no prescription.
That distinction is crucial. There was a study in 2024 that found only about 30% of semaglutide from unregulated online sellers actually met quality standards. 30%! But that number says nothing about products from properly licensed pharmacies that follow sterile compounding standards and test every batch.
And this is where understanding the pharmacy types matters. There are two main categories. 503A pharmacies compound medications for individual patients based on a specific prescription. Then there are 503B outsourcing facilities, which produce larger quantities under FDA oversight. The distinction matters right now because the FDA just proposed excluding Semaglutide, Tirzepatide, and Liraglutide from the 503B bulks list entirely. They're saying there's no clinical need for bulk compounding since brand name supply has stabilized.
That's a huge development. But people need to understand what this actually means. The FDA is not saying all compounded semaglutide is illegal. 503A pharmacies can still compound patient-specific prescriptions under certain exemptions. The proposal targets large-scale bulk compounding by 503B facilities, and the public comment period is open through June 29th, so this isn't final yet.
Now, let's talk about the actual safety data on semaglutide itself, because the clinical evidence here is really reassuring. A Harvard and CDC study from 2025 estimated fewer than 4 emergency department visits per 1,000 patients taking semaglutide. Most of those were for GI issues, not anything life-threatening.
The side effect profile is well established. The most common things people experience are nausea at about 37%, fatigue around 17%, some vomiting and constipation. But here's the key part. These are mostly mild to moderate and temporary. They tend to happen during dose escalation and settle down as your body adjusts.
So if the medication itself has a solid safety profile, what are the real risks with compounded versions? The number one safety concern is dosing errors. The FDA reported over 500 adverse event reports by April 2025, and many involved patients who accidentally administered 5 to 20 times their intended dose because the instructions were unclear.
Which is exactly why the provider you choose matters so much. It's not just about the medication, it's about the entire support system around it. Does your provider give you clear dosing instructions? Do they offer one-on-one onboarding support? Is there a clinical team you can actually reach if something feels off?
And that's what separates platforms like TelehealthFX from the sketchy corners of the internet. If you're looking for a GLP-1 weight loss program that does this the right way, go check out TelehealthFX.com. That's TelehealthFX.com. They use licensed U.S. compounding pharmacies. They give you a 24-hour provider review, one-on-one onboarding support so you're never guessing about your dose, and the pricing is completely transparent. No hidden membership fees, no surprise charges. Plus, they ship via 2-day UPS, so you're not sitting around wondering where your medication is.
Now I want to bust some myths because there's so much misinformation out there. Myth number 1, all compounded semaglutide is dangerous. Not true. The safety depends on pharmacy quality, licensing, and testing. Myth number 2, compounded semaglutide is the same as generic semaglutide. Also not true. There is no generic semaglutide. Generic would mean an FDA-approved bioequivalent product, and that doesn't exist yet. Compounded is custom-made by pharmacies.
That's such a big one. People use the word generic all the time, and it's just not accurate here. And myth number 3, that the FDA banned all compounded semaglutide. That's not what happened. They removed semaglutide from the shortage list, which ended the broad authorization for 503B bulk compounding. But 503A patient-specific compounding can still happen under the right conditions.
So let's make this actionable. If someone's listening right now and considering compounded semaglutide for weight loss, what should they look for? First, verify the pharmacy is licensed. If it's a 503B facility, you can look it up on the FDA's registered outsourcing facilities list. Second, ask for a certificate of analysis showing sterility testing, endotoxin testing, and potency verification. If a provider can't produce that, walk away. Third, make sure the product uses semaglutide base, not a salt form like semaglutide sodium. Salt forms were never tested in clinical trials. And fourth, which is the most overlooked one, make sure you're getting ongoing medical supervision, not just a one-time prescription where you're on your own. You want a provider that checks in on your progress, adjusts dosing as needed, and is there when you have questions. That's clinical weight loss versus just buying medication online.
Which is exactly the TelehealthFX model. They're licensed in all 50 states. They offer semaglutide, Tirzepatide, NAD+, and sermorelin through one platform. And the onboarding process is designed so you feel confident and supported from day one.
So here's the bottom line. Is compounded semaglutide safe? When it comes from a licensed pharmacy with proper quality testing, clear dosing documents, and NCLEX support behind it, the evidence says yes. It can be a safe and effective option for GLP-1 weight loss. The risk comes from unregulated sources, unclear instructions, and lack of medical oversight.
And the best way to eliminate that risk is to work with a platform that does the vetting for you.
So if you want to see whether you qualify, here's what I want you to do right now. Go to go.telehealthfx.com/start and take the free qualification quiz. It takes a few minutes, and you'll know if you're eligible for semaglutide or Tirzepatide delivered to your door. Again, that's go.telehealthfx.com/start. No hidden fees, no membership charges, just transparent clinical weight loss.
And as always, remember that this podcast is for educational purposes. Everyone's health situation is different, so please talk to a healthcare provider before starting any new medication. Individual results vary, and GLP-1 medications aren't right for everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to TelehealthFX Talk. If this episode was helpful, share it with someone who's been asking about compounded semaglutide. We'll see you next week with another deep dive into the world of GLP-1 weight loss. Take care, everybody.
See you next time.